As a merchant, I'm kind of a big deal. I sell stuff to the people, and not just anything, but the stuff that they want and the stuff that they need, such as their everyday essential needs to wonderful works of art that we didn't make. Sure, we weren't as respected and up there as the artisans and samurai, but we're still important. Into the Edo period, we steadily got a lot more powerful and wealthier. We're still at the bottom of the social scale, beneath the samurai and craftsmen, but we hold a lot of economic power. While the samurai favored under the law and keep the privileges and dignity, we merchants probably have the most fun of all of the other classes. Because we can afford it, we get to go to many of the major cities' restaurants, theaters, and of course the brothels. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't for us privileged merchants, and of course with the help of the daimyo, I mean the really privileged ones, not just any old merchant off of the street, the national exchange and support costs incurred in Edo would not have been as rapid as it was. I mean, I don't think we had it best by any means. We've had our fair share of troubles. At first we had very close ties with the Tokugawa family along with the artisans and laborers. But after the country opened up in around 1853 and it pursued its political and economic policies, well, let's just say those ties loosened up. But that's not the worst of it at all. We who profited from foreign trade got absolutely wrecked. Our establishments were destroyed and things were stolen. Absolutely terrible. 1868 wasn't the best of times either. In April of that year, Edo Castle was surrendered to the new imperial regime, and a large part of the castle was in ruins afterwards. We didn't enjoy the change at all. As a matter of fact, I once heard of this merchant who knew another merchant who wasn't allowed to enjoy the cherry blossoms after that occupation in Edo. The richest of us even had it worse. Many of them had really bad business and were targets of theft. Not only that, the constant threats of war forced them to pack up and leave Edo. I have a letter here from May of 1868, and it says, "The worst feature in the present situation is the guerrilla warfare, which is now carried by our bands of masterless men, conveniently disowned by their hereditary chiefs." I'm so sorry I'm breaking up right now. Keep their whole country immediately north of Yedo in a disturbed state, and make the capital no means of pleasant residence for the Mikado's representatives, and quite untenable for traders, who have accordingly deserted the place en masse, much to the detriment of our commerce. Isn't that just terrible? That's not all. Here's a segment from a diary entry from that time by a man named Katsu. "Not only has my petition been rejected, but the people in the capital, not being Edo of course, are seized with apprehension and followed blindly by wild argument. Because of this, noisy ruffians loot and commit murders. They are unable to wait calmly for the imperial terms of settlement as true bushi would. Merchants have closed their doors, and the impoverished people have lost their means of livelihood. The streets at night are deserted. Is this a sign of a degenerate world? The once great castle is today overgrown with weeds. Its towers are crumbling, and its enclosures have become a den for beggars and outcasts. This is indeed a situation difficult for a retainer to bear. All of the retainers, your humble servant included, have lost their means of livelihood. More than 370,000 men are starving. Because of this, 300,000 merchants of Edo have also lost their means of livelihood. At night, thieves wander about and cut down the unfortunate. The aged are left to die on the streets, and bands of young men gather in the outskirts of the city to pillage and plunder." Just reading these journal entries are making me depressed. I don't think I feel happy about being a merchant anymore.
Oh, hey there. Was that a merchant who just ran out? Poor guy. Merchants can only follow the rise and fall of the economy and political power to make their profit. As an artisan, I will always have work. But I am not as important as a peasant, though. We will always need rice. In my humble opinion, we are below the peasants because though we make and sell our items, They are not necessities for survival per se. And though I too follow the rise and fall of political power and the economy, my income is not necessarily dependent on these events. My work arises from the needs of society, but of course it also depends on the type of craftsman that I am. There are a variety of occupations that can be considered artisan-like: ukiyo-e painters and wood print makers, sword makers, furniture makers, architectures, clothes makers. I think you get the idea. We artisans basically make and sell items that are useful to daily life. In the warrior-based society, the weapons makers are very highly esteemed, so much so that they can even receive the privileges of the samurai. So although we make daily life items, we more or less cater to the rich, which is where most of our profit comes from. Another way in which authors and artists of the popular culture genre make profit is through shogokai, or celebrity banquets, which basically functions like a modern-day fundraiser gala. Not that I would know anything about modern-day stuff. Where the authors and artists would be able to exhibit their works before an appreciative paying public. It's quite the show, let me tell you. Now this may seem fun and all, but don't think it is easy to become an artisan. You would first have to attain an apprenticeship position with a master of the craft, and after 7 to 8 years of learning the craft, you have 3 choices to make. Either the master can give you some of his wealth to help you get started with your business. You can continue working to become better known among the patrons of artisans, or you can continue working for your master as a journeyman, a trained craftsman. Not only were you expected to know the techniques and skills of the trade, but you also need to know the terminology and history of the trade. Anyways, business especially boomed when the first Tokugawa shogun Ieyasu established the policy of sankin kotai, alternate attendance, and a political hostage system. As the daimyo were encouraged to build and repair their castles, we artisans enjoyed relative prosperity, along with the merchant class. However, with our empowerment by this economic success and increasing education levels, we townspeople began to feel constricted to our class position at the bottom. Hence came the creation of popular fiction, where we can freely state our opinions in various methods about our life and the decomposition of the government. As an artisan, though, I would have to say that there haven't really been much foreign influences that have affected us in our businesses, thanks to the closing off of the country. I mean, we just make daily life stuff anyways. Thinking about that makes me... Watch out! Fire! Fire! Man, that always happens here in Edo. You would think that we would have better prevention methods in place by now, but nope, we don't. Although, fires does mean business, if you know what I mean. Now if you'll excuse me.
As a peasant, you would think that I am relatively unimportant among the Tokugawa Bakufu social classes, but that is actually not the case. Sure, I am not a samurai, artisan, or even a merchant, but if it wasn't for my hard work, the other classes would never be able to function. Peasants are important because we are the class that provides the production of the entire stock of food for the rest of society. But even though I am considered valuable, this does not mean that I have an easy life. In order to maintain their powerful status, the Tokugawa Bakufu strictly enforces the policy of fixed classes, so that none of the classes can easily change into another. In the cases of us peasants, we are not allowed to move away from the land that we have been stationed in. We are part of the land, and therefore automatically fall into the ownership of the next landowner and are not permitted to leave. And, as well as not even owning land, it is the responsibility of peasants to do all the work of farming and growing crops in the section of land that we get stationed in. After all the work of growing and maintaining these crops, when it is time to harvest them, one of 2 things happen. 1, either I get to keep a designated amount for myself and my family to eat, and the rest goes to the shogun, or 2, everything I produce goes to the shogun and I have to wait for days to eventually get some distributed back as charity. So after all my hard work, I am not permitted to save any of my crops to sell at the market. How unfair is that? I slave away day in and day out, only for enough to eat to survive. Not only that, but when times are hard, like when there is a poor crop due to bad weather, the shogun and daimyo's required amount of rice remains the same, and I get next to nothing. The Bakufu always win, and the poor peasants and farmers are the ones who suffer most. To top it all off, we recently had some bad luck in town, what with the Great Edo earthquake of 1855 that caused much devastation and destruction to the area. If that wasn't bad enough, along with recent arrival of foreigners also came the introduction of cholera to our people, which resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths. However, despite all our peasant troubles, it looks like the Tokugawa Bakufu policies could change soon. Thanks to the arrival of Commodore Perry to Edo in 1853, there might be some drastic changes for us poor peasants and farmers, and hopefully for the better. The supposedly high and mighty Bakufu is having some serious trouble maintaining their preferred way of ruling and preventing foreigners from entering the country. Ever since Commodore Perry threatened Edo with cannons from the ships in the harbor to force the opening of trade upon us, the Bakufu has been struggling for control over the situation and the credibility of its reputation. The emperor does not want any foreigners entering, and the daimyo want to go to war. To gain more time, the Bakufu have agreed to provide safe haven for Americans who might be shipwrecked and in need of supplies and assistance, while on the side making preparations for war. How ashamed the Bakufu must feel. For years they have ruled with strength and unyielding policies, only to be quickly put in their place by the foreigners. Weakened and challenged as they are now, it could be that a revolution is in our future. Perhaps with a new government, the class system could be abolished. With no more landlords and daimyo gaining all our profit, we poor peasants may be finally allowed to own our own land and sell our own crops freely. It would be wonderful to actually start saving money and leave my fixed social class once and for all. I am interested to know how the lives of us peasants might improve in the future.
Oh, hi there. Almost didn't see you. I was just coming back from the granary to get my rice stipend. We receive 3 rice stipends a year, a quarter in the spring, a quarter in the summer, and the rest in winter. But anyway, I am a samurai, obviously. Now, I'm not a very high-ranking samurai. I guess you could say I'm of low rank. I'm allotted a plot of land and a house, and I receive only about 40 koku of rice a year. 1 koku is slightly less than 5 bushels. Because of my lower rank, I found it difficult to obtain a lot of respectable jobs. Unfortunately, the work I find is less than admirable. But hey, if I got a monthly position, I probably wouldn't have nearly enough time to spend in the pleasure district as I do. But then again, if I received a position, I would probably have a lot more money to spend in the pleasure district and could afford better women and sake. Here in Edo, gold is the basis for currency. The standard unit is 1 ryo. 1 ryo is equal to 4 bu, which is equal to 16 shu. In the Kyoto-Osaka region, silver is the currency used. The standard unit is 1 monme. 60 monme is equal to 1 ryo. The rest of the country uses copper coins strung together with a strand of hemp in groups of 96 or 960 mon. 4,000 mon is equal to 60 monme, which is 1 ryo. But since this is Edo, you can just forget about the monme and the mon. 1 koku of rice sells for just over 1 ryo on the market. Now, while I say I receive about 40 koku of rice a year, I actually only receive about a third of my income. I know, it's confusing. I actually get 40 bales of rice, which is a third of 1 koku of rice. And it's not all in rice, about a third is actually paid in rice and the rest in ryo. So, to summarize, or, as I like to say, to samurais, I get about 13 bales of rice and a little over 9 ryo. Now, to throw some more numbers at you, a grown man, like myself, eats about 4.5 bales of rice a year. And a woman, like my wife, eats about 3.8 bales. Now that's plenty of rice for my wife and I, but we have 2 kids, so it's not quite enough to feed my family. And the money isn't quite enough to live off of either. It's not even enough to cover basic things like fish, vegetables, sake, etc. I'm sure you're wondering where the extra money comes from for me to support my family. I'll do a little bit of anything if the opportunity comes up. I've previously traded swords, did favors for friends. No, not those kind of favors. I've lent money at a high return rate, of course. And even organized protection for tea houses and brothels once. But even when I find a good income, it's still tricky to stay out of debt. It's not just my frequent visits to the pleasure district. It's not even my love of sake. It takes money to earn money. One must keep up appearances. Would you want to do business with a man wearing a ragged kimono or clothes of imported silk? No. And it would bring dishonor to my name if I didn't make the rounds of my superiors dressed correctly in a starched jacket and overskirt and a pair of swords in my belt. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why don't I get a real job through my shogun? First, I'll describe a little bit about my background. I was born the second son to my parents, and since my older brother was competent enough to inherit my father's rice stipend, I was adopted to another family at a young age. These days, it's very common for multiple-sonned families to adopt the excess out to families who lack sons. That way, they have someone to pass their family name down to. There are 3 classes of vassals who serve the Tokugawa shogun: the daimyo, bannerman, hatamoto, and houseman, gokenin. My 40 koku stipend puts me into the lowly category of kobushin, an unemployed samurai. Daimyo had domains of 10,000 koku or more and are independent lords in their own right. By 1800, there are about 270 daimyo. Of these, house daimyo, fudai, staff the highest offices in the shogunate. Bannermen have fiefs and stipends of less than 10,000, but usually more than 100 koku. They are the samurai elite who served in the upper middle level and middle level posts in the shogunate. There are about 6,000 bannermen. Both higher-ranking bannermen and daimyo had vassals of their own. Housemen number about 20,000, hold lower stipends, do not have the right of audience with the shogun, and are eligible, mostly, for low-ranking posts. Right now, all of us samurai make up about 6% of Japan's population. The main problem isn't just that I wasn't born into a high enough class. It's that here in Tokugawa, Japan, there are more samurai than official and military posts. Even though the shogunate institutes monthly, daily, and half-day shifts, there still aren't enough jobs to go around. Almost a quarter of the vassals of the shogun are jobless. The best qualified are taken for posts appropriate to their rank, and the rest, including the young, the old, the sick, and the incompetent, were left to find less honorable work. In the sub-unit my stipend places me in, the commissioner makes recommendations whenever government posts become vacant. Everyone seeking work in the sub-unit reports to his residence on the 6th, 19th, and 24th days of each month. These occasions, called aitai or otai, are also the time to submit marriage requests to adopt an heir, retire, or make changes affecting their life as retainers. The real suck-ups line up every morning in front of his entrance to see him off to work. Not me. If you're fortunate enough to be recommended by him, the shogunate inspectors investigate your entire life. Your finances, literary and military talents, your domestic situation, retainers, etc. After making it through the inspection, you finally get summoned to report to Edo Castle. All that work just to get a job. And when you get the job, you have to spend money on office attire and gifts for all your superiors. But the postings bring not just an honor to your family, but an additional salary on top of your rank stipend. Families were known to remain in the Kobushin-gumi for generations, settling in Honjo, Fukagawa, Koishikawa, and other tradesmen's districts of Edo. They supplemented their meager stipends by making toys, lanterns, umbrellas, or by working as carpenters, plasterers, and gatekeepers. Almost all were deeply in debt and had long since parted with their best kimono and swords. Little wonder that Kobushin samurai were known for their loose behavior and utter disgrace of the law. It's not surprising that I haven't been offered a post. I'm not skilled in literacy, and I'm almost always in debt. Even if I were offered a position, I would probably have to turn it down because of my current debt. These days, moneylenders won't even meet with me. But don't think I'm not proud to have been born a samurai. I can assure you that I'm quite content with my life during both hard times and easy times. A samurai should always serve their master, the shogun, with utmost loyalty, and their parents with filial devotion. And we should never forget the debt we owe to Lord Tokugawa Ieyasu. It's because of him that we have this current age of peace, that we don't go without food, and that we have the comforts of family and home.
My name is Nikolai Razanov. I am a Russian, and I've come all the way to Japan on false pretenses. I came here with a letter, and they told me that they would see me, but they had to send the letter by the road all the way to Edo. We arrived in Nagasaki. It's far from the capital, Edo. So they had to scurry off and bring the letter to Edo and talk to the Bakufu and say if they want to trade with the Russians. They are afraid of Russia because we have vodka and we are very powerful. They don't want to open trade with us. No, I understand. We are strong. Strong like oaks. I've been waiting and waiting. It takes months for them to get back to me. Russians don't like to wait. I'm running out of vodka. And then, finally, they come back. And they have this letter. And this letter says, Japan has no great wants and therefore has little occasion for foreign products. Her few real wants are richly supplied by the Dutch and the Chinese. I wasted all this time for nothing. Hello, my name is Ingeborg Kempfer. I am a physician from the Netherlands. I'm Dutch. I came with the Dutch, obviously. We came because we are good, traders with the Japanese. So we are only considered merchants, and in Japan that is the lowest rank. Also, we are confined to visitors that are only personal servants because we are not trusted. Also, a lot of things happened when we first came. The governor had us put into our rooms that very day and instructed us to be locked up, and we are not permitted to see anyone except for personal servants. So that was a little difficult, but we eventually were let go. We see many fires from our window. They happen here a lot because the houses are all made out of very flammable wood, and also we have seen many fires in the distance, and they happen quite frequently. It's quite frightening. I spent a lot of time in Japan, yes. And so I wrote a book. You can buy it at your nearest bookstore, but I will read you a passage. It is from one of my favorite cities there, Edo. So, Edo ranks the highest among the shogun's free merchant cities. It is connected to a long bay, and the seabed is muddy here, and the water is so shallow that barges carry freight must anchor 2 miles away and from the city to unload. Like the other cities in Japan, it is not surrounded by walls, but is crossed by several wide moats, as well as high ramparts, which trees are planted in order to stop fires from spreading. Let's see here. There are a large number of rivers running in a westerly direction through the southern part of the harbor. A large arm of this river runs north around the shogunal castle and back south into the harbor in 5 separate streams. Each of these streams has its own name and is spanned by a fine, high bridge famous throughout Japan. The first is called Nihonbashi on account of its size and excellence. It is the most important bridge and considered to be the center of the whole of Japan. Now, the city is full of people from other parts of the country, monks and citizens. Among their number are the many servants of the shogunal court, and especially the high-ranking noble families from all over the country who must hold court and reside there. The city is built very untidily because it was not planned one at a time, but gradually grew in size. But many quarters have straight roads crossing at right angles. They are constructed in this fashion when a large fire, which occurs only too often, makes room for them. One sees various burnt out areas that have been rebuilt. The houses are small and low, and as in other Japanese cities, built of pine wood and thin clay walls. Inside they have paper sliding partitions and windows, and fine rush mats on the floor. The roofs are decked with pine chips, and the whole construction, so to speak, is put together from such light tinder that they easily catch fire. As can be imagined, this city where the shogun and the many territorial lords hold court has many palaces. They are closed off with stately gates and outer courtyards, are entered by lacquered stairs of several steps, and inside are the magnificently divided rooms. But they are only one story high and are not embellished with towers. A variety of arts and crafts, trades, merchant guilds and businesses flourish in this city, but everything is more expensive than elsewhere because of the large number of idle people attached to the court and the monasteries, and the difficulties in transporting provisions. That is only a small portion of my book. You should go to your nearest store and buy one. Thank you.